We are honored and delighted to have you here with us, Rabbi Lipman, and without further ado, it is my honor to present to everyone Rabbi Lipman.
Thank you so much for the introduction. I just spent a wonderful few hours, first with President Joel, and then with students, members of the Israel Club, and really got a sense for some of the things that are happening here at Yeshiva University. I can tell you that these last few days have been a whirlwind of meeting with various organizations and very powerful people, and my greatest thrill is to be with you here tonight. Certainly scanning the room and seeing some very familiar faces, and to see former students. I'm not in education anymore in a formal sense, but I miss it very much, and it's so great to see all of you. I'll stick around afterwards and we can talk about my wife and the kids and everything else. The David says, Shir HaMa'alot B'Shuv Adonai Yeshivat Zion Hayinu K'chomim. And all of us that are in this room, certainly students, we were born into a world where the state of Israel exists. It's a part of our life. And sometimes we forget that David said that the return of the Jewish people to Zion is a dream. We're dreaming. This is something which is beyond anything that our ancestors could imagine happening, and it's important to remind ourselves of that. I have the great thrill of being reminded of that every single day in my new role. It's overwhelming to see every day that building in front of me as I pull in. During the day, you kind of forget about the awesomeness of the place and you're very busy, and then you're reminded of it again as you leave at the end of the day. But it's been a remarkable trip getting to the point where I'm a member of Knesset, and I want to share with you a little bit about that story, but really focus more on what's going on in Israel today. The remarkable government, the remarkable party that I'm part of, and for you to understand why we should be so hopeful for the direction of Israel. When we made Aliyah in summer 2004, we got on the Nefesh flight. Didn't know what world we were going to be entering into, but I can tell you that the farthest thing from my mind was entering Israeli politics, and certainly becoming a member of Knesset. I'm an educator, I love teaching, and that's what I thought I'd be doing for a really long time. So what happened? Had somebody who was in Chinuch and wrote books and loved being part of that world, how does he end up in Israeli politics and in the Knesset? So essentially, a few months after we moved to Israel, I was in my house in Beit Shemesh, and I heard a commotion outside. And I went outside to see what's going on. And I saw 3 police cars on the street corner, and there was some protest going on by a group of extremists. I didn't really know what was happening. And I asked the policeman, I said, what's going on? And he says to me in Hebrew, he says, run, run, run. I said, why should I run? And before he had a chance to answer, this hailstorm of rocks came flying down on us. Essentially, these extremists were throwing rocks. They were stoning the Israeli police. And I got hit by one of the rocks. It hit me in the leg, and I was bleeding, and I went home. I was thinking to myself, we moved to Israel prepared for all kinds of scenarios and sacrifices. We have children, there's military service, God forbid there are terrorist attacks. Who knows what happens when we move to Israel? But the thought of a Jew throwing a rock at another Jew, or throwing a rock at me, was something I would never have been able to imagine happening. And it shook me up on many levels. And even though it was just a bunch of extremists, and it's not reflective of mainstream Haredim in Israel at all, and the average Haredi is a wonderful person, a loving person, would never be violent towards another Jew, and that's all true. The fact that the next day, there weren't headlines saying, a Jew threw a rock at another Jew in Beit Shemesh, but it's just sort of part of Israeli society and acceptable, that made me say, I have to do something about it. I have to do something about it. And I tried initially to be a mediator. I figured I'd come from a Yeshiva background. Maybe I could somehow find a way, can't we all just get along, that approach? And it didn't work. And I switched over time to becoming more of a community activist and to really fight against the extremism and to say that we're not going to tolerate this kind of behavior in Medinat Israel. Unfortunately, as you are a community activist, you can write columns and arrange demonstrations about everything you want. you start to learn that real change only happens in government. That the place where you can really change the future of the country is in Knesset Israel, is in the seat of government. The Jewish people, after a few thousand years, we're autonomous and we have our own parliament and we can affect the entire future and make real changes. And sometimes change has to happen through actually making laws and forcing it on a certain level on the tzibor, on the society. I didn't necessarily think that I was going to become a member of Knesset. I was looking around for some kind of political home to try to be involved, to be part of the system. And my first stop along that trek was with a former member of Knesset, the Rabbi who many of you might be familiar with, who was a Haredi rabbi, who talked about changes that have to take place in the Haredi system, but really, my focus wasn't so much on the Haredi system, but more about unity. Thank you so much. More about unity, that the Jewish people need to be a people in Israel who can get along with one another and break down barriers and start functioning as one instead of everybody worrying about their own sector. For reasons I won't get into right now, Rabbi Salom's vision didn't really formulate itself within Am Shalem, which was his movement and his party. I wanted to be part of a group where it was men and women, Sephardim, Ashkenazim, religious, non-religious, Ethiopians and Russians, and everybody really working together in order to move things forward in the state of Israel. And I actually came to the conclusion that there wasn't such a home. There was no place in Israeli politics where I could really find that. The one name which was the farthest possibility, and not on my radar screen at any level, was Yair Lapid. All I had heard in the rumor mill was he's anti-Haredi, he's anti-religious, he's anti-Jewish, he's an anti-Semite. These are the things that you hear as you just listen to the buzz that's out there, and it just wasn't anything I considered. And then a new friend, who's actually now my chief of staff in my Knesset office, sent me a link to a speech that all of you should watch. At some point, you can get it on YouTube. It's Yair Lapid at Kiryat Ono. Yair Lapid went to a Haredi program, college program for Haredi young men, and he stood up, a secular icon in Israel, stood up and he said two words which I hear echoing in my mind all the time. And he said, Atem nitzachtem, you've won. You, the religious and Haredim in Israel, you have won. And what did he mean? And he explained himself. And he said when the state of Israel was founded, there was a battle regarding what kind of country we were going to have. The secular founders of the country, people who, by the way, I revere for their courage and the vision and the initiative they took in starting this country, they wanted to have a secular country, devoid of religion, devoid of Torah, devoid of mitzvot, the way we understand it in terms of a command from above. And the religious Zionist and Haredi movements fought against that and said, no, our basis to be here is God and Torah, and it has to be a place where Torah and mitzvot flourish. And Yair Lapid stood up and he said, you've won. There is no basis, you have shown us that there is no basis to be in the land of Israel, if not based on God, if not based on Tanakh, if not based on our rich history. We cannot separate ourselves and detach ourselves from all of that. And he said, but now it's time for us to work together. Take responsibility, you've won the battle, and now it's time for religious and secular to work together and make this country great. And I felt, when I watched it, that there was like this hand coming out from the secular side and saying, we're reaching out to the religious community right now, it's time for us to work together. And I wanted to be at least one of those people that grabbed the other side and said, we can do this. It's so much what I've always believed. So I sent an email I found online something lapidteam@gmail or something, and I wrote an email saying I'd love to be involved in this process. At that point in time, the operation, and it's just wild to see the transformation now to a party which is a leading party in the government with ministers and the like. It was Yair Lapid and 3 volunteers renting a back room in a law firm in Tel Aviv. And I went to meet with Tami Nasi, who was one of those volunteers, and I said, I want to help. She was very skeptical, looking me over, and she said, why do you want to be involved? What's the hidden agenda here? And I told her that I really believe in Achdut, I really believe in unity, I really believe it's time to break down these barriers, and I want to be a part of this. So she said, okay, the first step, and I wasn't thinking about being a member of Knesset or anything along those lines. I wanted to be involved. In particular, I wanted to be involved in formulating policy regarding the Haredi community. And I want to be very clear. The Haredi community in Israel is filled with some of the most wonderful people you'll ever meet. People who are value-centered, people who are warm, people who are balei chesed, and people who have only good things to contribute to the state of Israel. The problem is, the broader state of Israel doesn't know that, because the community is very isolated from the rest of Israel, not really a part of Israeli society. I wanted to be part of breaking down that barrier and enabling the Haredi community to really become part of Israeli society. I wanted there to be a Ner Yisrael, which I attended, for my son, or my grandchildren in Israel to be able to attend. Why can't there be within the Haredi community these types of institutions which balance together? Studying Torah together with general studies and being trained to be part of the workforce. So I also want to be part of any policy in terms of the Army to make sure that any legislation is sensitive to the needs of the Haredi community. I'm one of the people who raises the flags in Israel about religious coercion, and we can't force our way on the secular community, but at the same time we can't have religious coercion against the Haredi community. And if you're going to draft people to the Army, you have to make sure that you're not causing them in any way to go against any real core religious principles of theirs as well. So I wanted to be part of that. And we brought Yair to Beit Shemesh. He gave a fantastic presentation in Beit Shemesh. And then I had the opportunity to have my first meeting with Yair, and we sat down and we talked. And I can honestly tell you, it was the first time since I moved to Israel that I sat down and had a real heart-to-heart of any kind with a Chiloni, a secular Jew in Israel. It never happened. I always said hello to people and always was nice to people, but to sit down and really talk about important issues. We talked about God, we talked about Torah, we talked about what Judaism is, we talked about our vision for the future of Israel. We saw the areas where we disagreed. We talked about a lot of personal aspects to our life. His father, who was a government minister, passed away a few years ago. He was very close to him, how that impacts who he is. I've got my father who passed away recently as well, and we really bonded, and a remarkable connection developed. Again, I still wasn't thinking about member of Knesset. It was to be involved in Yeshiva and really try to help this party get off the ground. But as time went along, the relationship deepened. And on October 17th, a date that I'll always remember, Yair invited me to have a meeting where he offered me to actually run on the Yeshiva list. He asked to have a meeting in English, which was a huge advantage to me, because I was able to express myself in deeper ways than I can in Hebrew. He speaks English fluently, and in that conversation I learned a lot more about him and Yeshiva. And he said, I want to offer you to run a list, but he said, I'm a man, he said to me, he said, I'm a man of my word, and I'm offering you now a chance to really, ultimately, be a member of Knesset. But Yeshiva, he said, is planning on tackling some very difficult issues in Israel. Issues that nobody wants to touch, the issues of religion and state. Issues of religion and state. What kind of country are we going to have? What kind of rules? In terms of Judaism, are we going to force on people? Are we not going to force on people? How is this going to work? And I asked him here, we went issue by issue to get a sense for what he'd be asking, because he said, I'm going to be asking you to vote in the Knesset chamber for these issues, and I have to know that you're going to do that. And we talked through the issues, and I understood exactly what we are going to be asking for in terms of religion and state, and we shook hands together, and we moved forward. I have to say that the 2 months of the campaign were 2 of the most thrilling months of my life, because Yair really formed a party which had all these types of personalities. He named as his number 2, which is very significant in Israeli politics, a religious Zionist rabbi, Rabbi Dov Lipman, who is now the education minister. Yair was really going out of his comfort zone to do that. And Rabbi Dov Lipman was going out of his comfort zone to say yes and to serve in Yair's party. And it went on. We had 8 women in the top 16. Never happened in Israeli history that there was such a large percentage of women on the list for Knesset. Ethiopian representation, Russian representation, English-speaking representation, people from all types of backgrounds in terms of religious practice and observance. And we began forming a family, and there's no other way to describe it. We are absolutely a family, which is very unusual for Israeli politics. Usually, the within the parties, it's all backstabbing and how can you out the next person. And we really function together as a very happy, healthy unit. And I got to know people who again, like I said, there was no opportunity for me to talk to them. The classic example, and remember this for a story a little later, is Yael German. Yael German, who's now the health minister, was the mayor of Herzliya, grew up in a very secular background. She was part of the Meretz party in terms of her political home. And we talked about real issues. We talked about religion. She wanted to understand, what is it like in the yeshiva world? What is this Torah, this privacy of Torah study really all about? Why is it such an important value? She said, I want to understand this community that we're trying to be involved in some kind of change. And I wanted to understand her. I wanted to understand what is it like to grow up as a secular Jew in Israel without any real Torah education, with very little Jewish education that she was exposed to. What is that all about? To understand where she's coming from. And we talked about these issues, and like I said, tremendous unity developed within the party itself. We approached election day, and throughout the campaign, my spot was not realistic. I was number 17 on the list. I was not expected to be member of Knesset. The night before the election, the Jerusalem Post called me, and they said that the next morning they're reporting my spot as being realistic. And life changed instantaneously. I told my wife, I have to go to the hotel right now. And I dropped everything, and I went to the hotel, and I poured my heart out like I don't remember ever doing, because I realized the opportunity that was in front of me to be able to serve the Israeli Knesset, something which I really did not think was going to happen, didn't expect to happen, it wasn't aspiring to make happen. But I realized the magnitude of what it could mean. I actually sent an SMS to Yair to tell him that I was at the hotel. I said, I'm davening for you, I'm davening for the party, I'm davening for myself. And he's always very responsive to any communication, but a few seconds later, an SMS came back from Yair. I was number 17, number 18 on the list is a young man named Boaz Toporowski. And Yair wrote back to me in Hebrew. He wrote, Itcha kfar sagarti, achshav ani oved al Toporowski. He said, you're a done deal. You're in, and now I'm working on number 18. The internal polling was very clear that we were doing very well, and the next day was just magical. We felt it in the air everywhere we went, people talking about Yesh Atid and the new vision that we have for Israel and Achdut and working together, and we felt it in the air. At 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the party headquarters called me and said that when I get to the headquarters that night, I'm going to be bombarded by the press because the polls seem to be indicating we're getting 17 seats, and since I'm the last one, the press will be focusing on me. Thank God we won 19 seats, and Maureen Hoffman got to do all the interviews that night, and I was able to just focus on what was happening in my life. But an amazing thing happened that night, and it's a story which I'm going to carry with me for the rest of my life, and I want all of you to hear this story. So, I mentioned before talking with Yael German and the unity that was happening in this party. Rav Shai Perron and I made a decision. Even though I grew up in America, and certainly if a female in any setting would stick her hand out to shake my hand, I'll shake her hand. That's the way I was brought up. That's certainly what my Rebbe told me to do as well. But we decided, you know what, we're going to be working together with all these people in the party. Let's explain to them that that's not the way we do things ideally. And very respectfully asked that the party is very huggy and kissy, and everybody's very close to each other. And we explained to them that we're not going to be part of that, but it's not out of any lack of respect. They ask questions, why, what's that all about? Just, that's the background to the story. So it's election night, and the way it works in Israel is at 10 o'clock at night, the exit polls come out on all the networks, and they're usually pretty accurate. And there are 3 screens, just imagine 3 screens in front of this room facing us, channel 1, channel 2, channel 10, and all the candidates are standing in the front row to watch the results. There's a huge room full of all the HT supporters. Behind those cameras are live feeds to all those networks from TV cameras to capture our response the moment we see the results, and photographers from every major Israeli newspaper also to capture that moment where we see the results of the election. At 9:58, I was standing there, and I looked to my right, and I realized that Yael was standing right next to me. I said to myself, oh my goodness, at 10 o'clock, we're going to see very good news on these screens, and Yael, not out of any maliciousness at all, just natural instinct, is going to turn and give me a massive hug, which, again, that happens in life, but it's going to be captured on national TV in Israel, and every major newspaper next morning is going to have the picture of the ultra-Orthodox candidate of Yesh Atid, who is saying that we can be part of society and not give up on religion at all, hugging Yal And I didn't know what to do, and I decided, you know what, I can't do anything. I decided to be here. I'm not going to insult her at 9:58 by bringing this up. Whatever happens, happens. 10 o'clock, you have 19, 19, 19 for Yesh Atid on every single screen. Yael turns to me, and she goes like this. Like that, and then she went like this. And I felt the hug. I felt it without her hugging me. I felt what she was trying to convey, and it was an amazing moment. It's very funny, it's comical, but think about for a moment what happened there. We had a conversation, we talked about where we're coming from and our values and our halachot and the like, and she knows that I have absolutely zero agenda to force her to do anything religiously. She knows that I respect her for who she is, even though I believe so fervently in what I believe. And as a result, she can respect me and respect what I ask for in terms of religion as well. And it really is a very powerful lesson that everybody should really internalize. That if you work together and just communicate with one another and have respect for one another, there really is a way for everybody to respect us and our values as well. It was a whirlwind after the election, learning what it means to be a member of Knesset. We went to Knesset school. All 19 of us at Yesh Atid were new to the Knesset. I worked harder during those days in Knesset school than I have in graduate school, that's for sure. Learning so much information, what it means to be a Chaver Knesset, what my role is, how to pass a law, how do you write a law, how do you run a committee, what committees you want to be on. Tremendous amount of learning to be done. And then we started our inaugural speeches. And amazing things started happening. Because Yesh Atid, the party which everyone associated with being anti-religious, some kind of an agenda against Torah. I certainly was the victim of many of those attacks in many different settings, and people suggested that. But Yesh Atid members got up, one by one, without being told to, and made such a Kiddush Hashem. There is one person, for example, who got up and said the bracha of Shehachigan. Another one got up, and Shimon Solomon, an Ethiopian immigrant, got up and he said, and I didn't know that he knew any Torah at all. He got up and he said, I'm looking at the Knesset seats right now. The seats are set up as menorah. And he said, I'm looking at the menorah. And he said, this week is Parshat Shuma. And he said, just like the menorah was made out of Mikshah Zahav, out of one solid block of gold, and then it was chiseled from there, let's always remember that all of us really come from the same source. And we might have disagreements, but we have to find a way to remember that. We've got beautiful things. Ruth Kalpara, my dear colleague, walks up there with a Gemara Ksubas and gives a Gemara shir to the entire Knesset. Remarkable things happened. Our party started the first Beit Midrash for Chaver Knesset in the history of the Knesset. And every single Tuesday at 3 o'clock, we sit down together and we study Torah, the members of Knesset. Ranging from myself, members of Yesh Atid, Bayit Yehudi, the Jewish Home Party, Stav Shafir from the Labour Party, Dov Lipman, who sits in the Hadash Party, which is Jews and Arabs together, and we learn Torah. We talk about a Parsha in Tanakh or a Galata Sugya, and we have discussions. And my staff knows that it's my Kodesh Kadashim. Unless the Prime Minister is calling, which will never happen, to a meeting, I'm going to be there at the Beit Midrash. I'm going to be there because it's such an important part of my day. Another thing that I learned, by the way, this is just a very personal level. My whole life I was teaching Torah. Torah was my day. And now all of a sudden I was thrown into a system where Torah is not my day. And I have my 25 minutes that I try to squeeze in after shopping every morning. And then my day starts, and then before I know it, it's 12 o'clock at night. And having that time to learn every Tuesday is so precious. To have that. The other thing I learned is the value of mincha in Ramadan. That has never paid attention to. But that mincha at the Knesset at 12:30 or 1:30 to sort of get myself refocused on what this is all about and why we're here. And it's all about Kiddush Shemayim. So wherever you end up, career-wise, all of you, having that time in the middle of the day is invaluable and it's necessary. And the wisdom of Chazal, in terms of establishing the times and the like. It's just brilliant to be able to just have that time in the middle of the day to really be focused on the Rebbeinu Shalom. It's been a world, like I said, we are now in the process of writing laws that are going to change the future of Israel, and by definition and extension, the future of the Jewish people. Yair reached out beyond his comfort zone, not just in his party, but then created a pact together with the Jewish Home, with Beit Yehudi. And the relationship between Yair and Naftali Bennett, which I see behind the scenes, is nothing short of spectacular. They're very close friends. It's not just a political alliance for some kind of political convenience. Naftali, to his credit, reached out beyond his comfort zone, a religious Zionist party which welcomed secular people into the party, and now made this pact as well. And this is new for Israel. Israel has been a society for decades where every sector looks out for itself. And now all of a sudden we have this alliance and this pact where people are saying, we're going to work together, we're going to create equality in national service, and we're going to do that. We're going to create education reform and get Israel back to the top 10 of the world in education, have more general studies on the religious side, and have more Jewish studies on the secular side. We are going to absolutely deal with religion as a state issue so that every single Jew, no matter what their background, no matter what their beliefs, can feel comfortable in the land of Israel and feel that it is their true homeland. It's difficult, it's a painful process, but it's something which has to be done. I want to make sure there's time for questions, so I just want to end with a few points. One of my roles, I'm part of the Chesed Immigration, Absorption, and Diaspora Affairs Committee, and I'll be the chairman of a committee which deals with the relationship between Israel and Jewish communities in North America. And I want to do a tremendous amount to increase Zionist education in the United States. The fact that I went through 12 years of Jewish JC education and didn't walk away fluent in Hebrew is something which I still can't get my hands around in terms of why that's not a priority. Putting aside Israel, just to open the world of learning up to all the students. And we have to do more to create relationships between Israeli students and students in North America. So that's certainly be a big part of my role, is to really work on those relationships. But I also want to be a big part of trying to inspire even more Aliyah. I want to be very clear. I'm not on an Aliyah tour right now, and I'm not here to tell all of you to make Aliyah. There are many reasons not to make Aliyah, and they're very valid reasons. But I really feel that if you're not making Aliyah, and you're not moving to Israel, why not raise your children to want to move to Israel? And let them be in a situation where at the youngest of ages they choose to stay there, and go to school there, and serve the army there, and make Israel their home. When I called my grandmother to tell her that we were moving to Israel, she survived in Auschwitz, and I was prepared for her to berate me for this. How can you move away? I'm not going to see my great-grandchildren. I was prepared for it, for anger. And I called her up and I said, Bubby, I received a job in Israel, and we're making Aliyah this summer. And there was a pause, and then she said something which I'll never, I hear her words, she's still thinking I'm alive, she said, when we were on the boat, going from Europe to America, I asked myself, why are we doing this? There's another place that we should be going to, and we didn't go there. And just the fact that her grandchildren and great-grandchildren are going there is the fulfillment of the dream. So I implore all of you to think about that. And even if you're not moving, and it's understandable for many reasons, but think about educating your children. And then you can join them in your retirement years and everything can be all around. That's the message that I want to share with you. But I want to go a step further. I grew up in America, and the Magic Kingdom is in Orlando. That's what I grew up with. But it's very mistaken. The Magic Kingdom is somewhere else. I grew up in Silver Spring, Maryland, and went a few times a year to demonstrate in front of the Soviet Embassy for Soviet Jewry. A few times a year we'd go there and we'd sing Am Yisrael Chai and then do our thing. And I remember very vividly one of those protests, somebody handed me a sign, I didn't know what it meant, but I held it up. And it said on that sign, it said, "Free Yuli Edelstein." That's what the sign said. That I held as a young kid in Silver Spring, Maryland. Growing up in Silver Spring, Maryland at the Embassy in Washington. Today, I sit in the Israeli Knesset, in the plenum sessions, in the Israeli Parliament, with Yuli Edelstein as the Speaker of the Knesset. That's the definition of the Magic Kingdom. That's where things are happening. And the Magic Kingdom is in Jerusalem, it's in Yerushalayim. And we all have to make sure we always remember that. Wherever we are, wherever we live, because whatever circumstances, that's where the Magic Kingdom really is. And I hope that all of you will be part of it, whether by living there or supporting it, being part of the Israel Club, whatever it is, Israel has to be our primary focus. Thank you so much for the time. I really wanted a chance to ask questions. I went through a campaign in Israeli politics, and I'm interviewed in Israeli press. No question is off limits or too difficult, and please feel comfortable to ask. We'll start right over here with the senior gentleman in the audience, please.
What is your relationship with the religious parties that are not in the government, and what do you foresee for the future about the relationship of you and your party?
The question was, what is my personal relationship with the ultra-Orthodox Haredi parties that are not currently in the government? I just want to clarify. They're in the Knesset. They are part of the process. Being in the opposition is a part of politics. It doesn't mean that you're no longer, you're banished from Israel for life. But what is my relationship with them? It's different between the two parties. There are two ultra-Orthodox parties. One is United Torah Judaism, and one is Shas. The Shas guys are really pleasant and really nice, and we talk to each other all the time. And they're far more moderate than I would have ever imagined them to be, and they've somehow allowed themselves to be dragged a little bit as a party to the more extreme side. Let's remember, Rabbi Yosef was the head of that party for years, was one of the most progressive poskim. You think about the decisions that he made in terms of Ethiopian Jewry and about conversion in terms of the Russians that have come, and many other issues. But somehow, over the years, they've gotten dragged a little bit politically together with UTJ. The members of UTJ, we don't live together, but we're talking to the same remote show, but we don't have very much communication with each other. I made a decision that I sit quietly in the plenum when they get up to the podium and say the most outlandish and outrageous things imaginable. And I think it doesn't do Torah a service for people from B'nai Torah to talk that way. Politically, it's very different. The reason why they're not in the government is because the day after the elections, when Yair Lapid was very willing to sit down and talk and figure out what compromises we can work, they stood up and they said, the status quo, we're not changing one thing about the way we live our lives, and at that point it became very clear that we can't make any changes in Israeli society if they're in the government. And that's unfortunate. I have a sense that Shas is angling their way to get back in eventually. That's just my feeling, just on the ground. But at some point down the road, we would be more than happy to work with them. Yair Lapid has never said one word against Haredim, against Torah. Many people associate Yair with his father. And his father was a different personality. Like I've said throughout the campaign in the Israeli press, when they asked me that question, but his father is Yair Lapid. I say, where would we be if the people, as a people, have ever really judged Aaron Levine based on his father? I think it's just a little bit not Jewish to do that. He's entitled to his own personality, and until you can show me that he's like his father, he's not his father. And that's very important to remember. So, behind the scenes, they talk a lot. Yair talks to them, they talk to each other. I also want to emphasize that many Haredim were involved in everything that we've been doing. In Yeshiva, certainly our plan for military and national service they've been involved with. I can tell you that there have been Haredi Rabbanim in my dining room who have said to me, thank you for what you're doing. Yeshiva will save the Haredi community from itself. That's the terminology they use. To which I say, so can you just do me a little favor and go out there and say that? So that it's not little Dov Lipman who's the punching bag for the entire community. They can't. They can't, and that's unfortunate. But I do believe that the Haredi population will not embrace, but they will go along with the changes that we made, and everything will be very good in the end. Okay, let's go around the room. Yes.
Hi. Fellows over Springer from Melvin J, so great job on that front. So you talked about unity in Israel, the fact that everyone should feel comfortable. But you also talked about the fact that when you realized you were going to be an MP, you went straight to the Kotel. But not everyone feels comfortable at the Kotel. Recently, Nathan Sharansky proposed that the Kotel be divided again, and that they created an egalitarian section. So I want to ask you a topless question. What would you do?
I'm going to surprise you with this one. Maybe I'll surprise you, we'll see. When my daughter Devorah became bar mitzvah last May, so we figured that the night that she was turning 12, my wife wanted to bring her to the kotel to daven. Just in the first hour that she was davening as the bar mitzvah. And it was the first time that I ever watched the women's side of the kotel. Right? When I go to the kotel, I go to davening. So I never really saw what happened on the women's side. And my wife could not get to the wall with my daughter. I couldn't believe my eyes. The women's section was packed, and it was a few rows deep. And then I turned to my left on the men's side, and it was wide open. And I had this thought, this is horrible. Right? This is horrible. Why should it be that way? Why can't we find a way that there's more space? I'm going to talk about that issue in a moment. And that led me to start looking into the whole issue. I'm horrified and embarrassed that I live in a country and I serve in a Knesset, which has a law on books right now, which says that a woman who wears a talit at the kotel is subject to a prison term of 7 years. Horrifying. I know the halacha. I know the sources that talk about women not wearing talit. I know the sources that say that women absolutely can wear a talit. And the reasons why they don't is because because they don't really do it. And the Mishnah Berurah mentions they need a schar. If they do it, they need a bracha. I know the sources. So why are we legislating this at the kotel? When I go down, it doesn't disturb my davening whatsoever. If a woman's wearing a talit, I don't understand it. So I actually wrote about this in the Jerusalem Post, and that was the first time I was subject to attacks from all sides because I was suggesting that there's nothing wrong with it. If it was up to me, and everyone else in the world agreed with me in terms of my philosophy, I would say people can do whatever they want to do. I don't understand why we're legislating that in terms of the code. So let's remember, there is not one non-Orthodox person who has suggested that we take down the mechitza at the kotel. They're not suggesting that. They understand that for Orthodox people to go there has to be mechitza. So if they're very respectful to our demand to have mechitza, why are we making demands on them in terms of doing what they want to do? Our party is going to be the one to write the law that Natan suggested in terms of that plan. It's fine, meaning in terms of solution, I'm happy that people will feel comfortable to go. It bothers me a little bit, just the scene of, I don't know, men, women, egalitarian. Just somehow for the Achdut message, it bothers me a little bit, that we just can't all sort of be in the same place, but I understand why it has to be. I'm happy that the more extreme elements aren't going to fight this plan. Apparently it's going to go without any major protests and the like, and Shalom Yisrael, I think we should be good for the Jewish people. Yes, please.
Going back to your position as chairperson, I have two questions. In relationship to the right-wing Reagan and your role now in dealing with Jews in the diaspora on the issue of conversion. Can you comment on that?
Sure. The question was about the conversion issue, which is the most complicated, by the way, of all the religion and state issues. Because if I say to people, just throwing this out there, you can get married however you want to get married, that's one thing. To say you can define Jews however you want to define Jews is a much more grave issue in terms of the ramifications for all obvious family. The first step in the conversion process is going to be Zerei Yisrael, which is a few 100,000 Russians who were persecuted in Russia because they were viewed as Jews, and now they're persecuted on a certain level within Israel because they're viewed as non-Jews. And they are not Jews according to halacha. They have a Jewish father or Jewish grandfather, and the sources are clear that the requirements of conversion for such a person are far more lenient than they are for a Gentile who comes out of nowhere to convert. Just to give you a sense, and we're not saying this, but there's even a shita amongst the Rishonim that says that somebody from Zerei Yisrael, no matter how many generations back, doesn't even have to go to mikvah as part of their conversion, because their ancestors went to mikvah at Sinai. Just letting you understand, just to give you a sense, we're not saying that. They do have to go to mikvah, but just to give you a sense of how lenient you can be if you want to be to help these people who are living in Israel. They're serving in our army, they're speaking Hebrew, they have Jewish names, and they need to have the right to live as Jews in Israel as well. That's the first step in Zerei Yisrael. That will have some ramifications, not for conversions in America, just people who stay in America, but it will impact people who want to make Aliyah. Because once people make the decision to move to Israel, that is a statement of your nation is my nation of sorts, and if they are from Jewish descent, there is room within halakha to be more lenient in terms of those conversions. The ultimate goal is certainly to set up a commission to try to find some kind of a uniform conversion policy. It's not going to be easy. I don't know if we're going to succeed. Where we on the Orthodox side are more lenient, but again, the Mayan Orthodox Shitot is still in the process, where other streams are willing to compromise and say that not all of their conversions can be accepted, and maybe find some kind of a unified policy, but we might not be successful. But that's the goal, at least to have the conversation. I want to know that at least at the end of the day we tried. We tried to do this. I look at the religious moments and we tried to find a way to unify on this issue. That's the goal.
The other question I had is, after you looked at the 3 screens and saw that Yeshiva had 19 seats, did they take pictures?
Did they take pictures of us? Absolutely. You will see a picture. Yeah. You'll see there's a picture where you'll see Yael. It was in the Yonah Rodot. You see her at that stage. You see her at that stage with the hands out like that. And that was captured. Yes?
I think speaking by that and others are interested in Aliyah. So as your role, very public, to deal with people or politics and public speaking, you also have to speak on Hebrew. I think you have to face reality, and you were born in Israel, we're not culturally Israeli. Does that hinder your, success if there's a leaked insecurity? How do you deal with that issue?
So I thought it was going to hinder my success. I thought there's no chance that I can do this. Israelis very much value English speakers who are trying to speak Hebrew. They're very patient. By the way, one of the laws that I want to pass is to change the numbers the way they should be in terms of Zachar and Nekeva. It's backwards. In terms of the number system. It's totally backwards, and we have to change that in legislation, because I want to make sure that I'm right. If you want to see something as Zachar, it's Arba'ah instead of Arba'ah. That's totally wrong. So we will hopefully change that. But Israelis are very forgiving. And what's actually happened, which is amusing to me, is it's almost become I've become the guy with the cute American accent in the Knesset. They love it. They love that somebody is not trying to sound Israeli, because I think we sound silly when we try to sound Israeli. I don't even try with the accent, and they're very forgiving of my grammar mistakes. And they're really proud that somebody moved to Israel 8 years ago and is serving in the Knesset. I see it everywhere I go. And initially I was very nervous about this issue, very nervous about this. And then I started doing some interviews, and after each interview, when I thought I was horrific in terms of my Hebrew, the newscasters would say, off the air, they'd say, you're fantastic. Your Hebrew is remarkable in terms of being here just for a few years. My biggest message is to trust yourself and just do it. Just, like Nike, just do it. Throw yourself into it, and Israelis are very forgiving, and you learn. You have to speak Hebrew though. You can't put yourself in a completely English-speaking environment and then think that somehow for osmosis you're going to get Hebrew. You do have to speak Hebrew, and Israelis are very forgiving. You know who are the greatest critics of my Hebrew in the Knesset? Americans. They said, oh, you sound so silly with an American accent, and I said, if the Knesset members can handle it, I'm very comfortable with it. Culturally, it's very different. It's a different world. I'm not part of the screaming back and forth and the like. I met with Yuli Edelstein the other day just to talk to him a little bit about how he could be an effective member of the Knesset. He won an award his first year of the Knesset for being the most gentle member of the Knesset. I said, okay, that award's coming right here because I don't feel comfortable screaming and shouting. I'll save that for when it's really important. But you get used to the culture also, meaning I can be tough if I have to. I can have a little chutzpah if I have to, and I'm learning that. And in the press, I certainly, without screaming and shouting and still being dignified, but I can make my argument, and I feel comfortable doing that, and that's very important. We just have to get to throw yourself into it. And if anybody, by the way, wants to get involved in Israeli politics, you should. I think it's important. I think that Americans bring a certain value system which is necessary in the Israeli system, and I would encourage you to do it. Young.
Yes, good to see you. The HHT reportedly has some policy positions which seem to be not sure that you agree with these positions politically, but if you do, isn't that moving in the direction more of a state for Jews than a Jewish state? And if you don't, are you prepared to go against the party of those high districts?
I knew Neil was going to give it to me. Very straightforward. The halacha doesn't say anywhere that I'm aware of that when we have a state of Israel in 2013, that I can't vote to allow people to do whatever they want to do. There's a halacha which tells me how I live my life, and I'm certainly raising my family that way. And while there is a concept of Koisel, we're responsible for one another, I don't know if that necessarily means that I have to force someone to agree with my values. And therefore, we've come up with a compromise on the various marriage issues. Any marriage which would be performed in Israel outside of the framework of halacha is going to be called the civil union. Meaning we're saying that is not marriage according to Jewish tradition and who we've always been. But at the same time, I can't stop you in a democratic country from having your rights, and therefore that's the way we're going to do it. By the way, I actually feel, this is my own statement, okay? I'm not quoting anybody. I actually feel it's a greater chilul Hashem to have the homosexual community in Israel out parading and making statements and protests on a regular basis than just quietly letting them do whatever they want to do and not having them be out there so much. Meaning, for people to live their private lives, live their private lives. I feel like it's in the public sphere, and it's this issue, I think it's even more of a chilul Hashem. That's in terms of that issue. In terms of Shabbat, again, the Torah tells me to observe the Shabbat. In all of Psukim, it doesn't say, and you better make sure that that secular Jew is also keeping Shabbat. I also believe it's a major chilul Hashem to have the demonstrations and the protests and the battle. So therefore, we are going to allow in secular areas, not government transportation, by the way, it's private, but they can have a busing system as long as it's not going to interfere with religious Jews and their Shabbat. And therefore, it's very specific areas. By the way, it already exists. In Haifa and other areas, people don't realize that. It's not a new decision, and I will vote in favor of it. Yes?
In terms of the marriages, and also in terms of toleration of things that in general were not previously so accepted, recently there's been a lot of people who have been going to Cyprus to get married because they can't marry non-Jews within the state of Israel. Is that something that you also want to change?
The bottom line is that everybody in Israel who wants to get married, or they want to get married, they do it. They go to Cyprus, they go to other places, and it happens. The worst thing that we're doing is, though, that we're forcing people to go under a chuppah and say the words of the should be Israel, even though they don't mean it. They don't mean it. And worse problems are created, because when you force people to get married according to halakha, and then they don't leave that marriage according to halakha, you're actually creating a framework for Mamzevus. You're creating a situation where it's far worse than people living together or even being married out of halakha. So that's just from a halakha standpoint why it's important. Obviously, Jews marrying non-Jews is a tragedy of the greatest proportions, and we need to do as much as we can in Israel to stop that from happening. We will not call that a marriage. A marriage is between two Jews doing that much in Israel. But like I said, two people living together, by the way, doing that anyway, and getting certain rights along with it, which is going to be allowed within Israel. I want to say something else, and that is very important for all of you to hear. As I traveled around Israel the last year or so, or a little more than that, secular young people have said to me, and it's so important to hear these words because it startled me when I heard it. They said to me, we hate Judaism, and we hate that we hate Judaism. They don't want to hate Judaism. They want to be proud Jews, and they want to feel that they embrace Judaism, whatever that means to them. And we, on the religious side, have really made that happen by not being as embracing as we should be, by forcing a lot of things, and that's a big part of what I want to see change. I think that we'll see a renaissance of people being proud to be Jews and a much stronger Jewish country. As ironic as that sounds, once we relax a lot of these issues. Well, a lot of questions. Yes?
I know you spoke about the Haredi disapproval or some smattering of approval to HFT, but what's the secular response been, continuing what they said about not wanting to hate Judaism, but what's been the recent response to the HFT?
There's a lot of, Yael Garland, for example, from the Meretz Party originally, who's now the health minister, she told me that she's getting tremendous flack from lot of people in the Sefer community for some of the compromises that she's willing to make. We're letting 1,800 boys a year be exempt from any service to be the elite Torah scholars and become the Gedolim. How can you do this? As she says, because I've sat with people like Dov and others and understood where they're coming from, the primacy of Torah study. And while I might not believe that, I have to respect that and respect that value. So there has been some negativity. For the most part, Israel in general has been very supportive of Yeshiva. Yair right now is the most popular politician in Israel. The polls indicate that if there were elections held today, Yeshiva would win 30 plus seats easily in the elections. And you know why that's happened? Because we've actually done what we said we were going to do. We've stuck to our values. We were prepared to go to the opposition if it meant that we had to, that's fine. We're not career politicians. We're people who really believe in our state and want to see a state that's a little different than it is today. And that's very important. People like to see value-centered people who speak the truth. And for the most part, it's just been supportive in nature. Yair is the finance minister. He has to oversee a budget. If you follow the news at all, he's going to make a lot of cuts in the budget because our deficit is way beyond anything that it should ever be allowed to become. And he won't be popular during that time, but he's prepared to lose popularity because of that. But again, I think when you stick to your values and you say the truth, you're rewarded for it. And you can mark it down in your lines or your iPads, whatever else it is, but I actually believe that he's going to be the next prime minister of Israel. I really believe that, and I think Magila deserves it. Yes?
Do you think the concept of Das Torah has anything to do with political sphere?
Well, the question is, who's Das Torah? Is it Rabbi Lipman, who said vote for Biden UD, or is it Rabbi Yosef, who said that's the Habayit Shel Goyim? Which is Das Torah? So people like to throw around the terminology Das Torah a lot, and what they mean by that is follow whatever Rav Steinman says, which actually means not to follow what Rav Steinman says, but to follow what the people around Rav Steinman have manipulated him to say. And I mean that very seriously. There is no disrespect for Get Alta Gully Torah, but I've seen the system at work. I've seen it at work. And there are people who are not Gedolim, who surround Gedolim. And I'm going to say two things right now, which it's important for you to hear. You're young people, and you're trying to get your heads around Das Torah and how does it all work. I spoke to a very close student of Rav Scheinberg, Scheinberg was a Gadol Torah of enormous proportions. A very close student who quotes Rav Scheinberg all the time. And he said, we reached a point where if you have $5,000, you can get something, anything you want, signed by Rav Scheinberg. Not because of Rav Scheinberg. Rav Scheinberg is not asking for that money, he doesn't even know that that's happening. But because people are able to have learned how to manipulate the system, and if you pay that person $5,000, he'll get you a letter signed by Rav Scheinberg. Just another point, Rabbi Yosef, Gadol Torah of enormous proportions. A person who every single obscure midrash and tshuva is at his fingertips. There's a special newspaper that's printed for him to follow Israeli news that he reads. So he was probably told that Biden UD wants to legislate that every single Jew in Israel should ride buses on Shabbat. So he came out and went to Shabbat and he said, Biden shall Biden. That was his response to whatever he was told. The system is broken. The system is broken. And therefore, when we throw around the terminology Das Torah, we have to be very careful about what we mean. Yes, I'll let that. Pasha.
מאוד מעריך את המאבק שהיה בבית-שמש נגד הקיצונים. עכשיו, המשפחה שלי משפחת חרדית, התורה היא משפחת יותר מודרנית מהמשפחה שלי, ואני גר בירושלים, אני גר בבית-שמש. אבל אז אני נתן לראות מה שעשית שם נגד הקיצונים, ואני חושב שהם עשו מעשים שלא יעשו, והיה צריך להעמיד אותם במקום. יש לי תקוות, הדבר היחיד שעשית, והבן אדם שלח עכשיו ברשות המפקדת, ששלחת להתראיין שלו. אני לא חושב שזה דבר, רק עשית את זה בצורה מאוד יפה, שדיברת על הקיצונים והכל, אתה לא דיברת נגד החרדים וזה, וזה אני מעריך, הצורה שעשית את זה. אבל אתה לא חשבת שיבוא יום ואני בתור ירושלמי נקדים בבוקר, ואני רואה שכל העיתונים יוצאים נקדים בתור ירושלמי, ואני, כאילו אני יודע שההנהגה החרדית ובשמש לא עשתה משהו כזה. אבל מה אני בתור ירושלמי עושה?
אני יכול לענות להקליט? בסדר. The question was, first of all, he said that he comes from a Haredi background and very much appreciates the battle that he had against the extremists in Beit Shemesh, but he said he has a criticism for him. And he wants to know how I went to be interviewed with the Yair Lapid about that whole incident in Beit Shemesh, which then led to the Israeli general population turning against all Haredim in Israel and kind of grouping them together. So I need to clarify some facts. I did not go to be interviewed by Yair Lapid. I don't know how that story got out there. It never happened. I was never interviewed by Yair Lapid. I never met Yair Lapid until June this past year. What I did do was as follows. For 4 months, there were girls in Beit Shemesh. It wasn't a one-time incident. For 4 months, these extremists, and I'm very happy that you said Kitzonim, because we were very careful during the entire battle never to say Haredim. I never one time said these are Haredim. It was always Kitzonim, they're extremists. The average Haredi would never even think about doing the things that these people do. But for 4 months, we were out there every day. I went every day. My daughters don't go to that school, but I went there to defend these girls and help them get home. And we were exposed to the most horrific things. Spat at myself, spat at in the face, called all kinds of horrible names, things thrown at us, and we did it. We went to the police, and we asked the police to please arrest them. And the police told me that it's freedom of speech, all they're doing is saying things, it's not against the law. And upon further investigation, I found out that this police chief has political aspirations. He wants to go into politics one day. And in order to survive in Israeli politics, you have to make sure that Yahadut Torah is on your side, and therefore he doesn't want to be known as the person who went arresting Haredim. I went to the Minister of Public Security's office and pleaded with them to please help out. Just to tell you a funny story. They weren't helping, and I actually did something which I really didn't want to do. And I said, we're Americans, and we have a lot of money, because everything's got a lot of money. And I said that we're gonna expose the fact that the Minister of Public Security's office didn't do anything about little girls being tormented on a daily basis in the streets of Beit Shemesh. The next day, it was the one time this happened in the whole episode. These 3 jeeps pulled up, and the super cops came out, wielding their sticks and whacking these guys. And I said, Rabboni Shalom, this is not what we wanted either. I wasn't asking to beat Jews in the streets of Beit Shemesh. But that happened one day, that they came and did that, and that stuff. We got to the Prime Minister's office, and nobody did anything about it. After 4 months, we got information that the extremists, the Kanayim, are planning on doing worse things. They weren't succeeding, screaming at the girls, and throwing eggs at the girls, and throwing tomatoes at the girls, so they're going to do worse things. And I took that very seriously. So we made a decision. That was a very difficult decision, and it's on my shoulders, by the way. I'm going to face the Rabboni Shalom after 120, and I'm very comfortable with the decision after what I saw. We decided to go to the press with the story. And I won't get into how we did that. It wasn't for Yair Lapid at all. Basically, we had 10 mothers in the school stand in front of the school with a silent protest that was happening, and it was a story. 10 mothers with signs that were very provocative in nature in terms of, basically they said, is my daughter really a prutza? Is my daughter really a shiksa? The press came. They asked me, can we have one person to speak to the press? And I asked Hadassah Margulies, who lives around the corner, who speaks fluent Hebrew, to speak to the press. And then Channel 2 contacted me about Rapat Shishi, and I actually declined to be interviewed for Rapat Shishi. But they interviewed Hadassah and Naama, the little girl. Naama cried. She didn't go to acting school. She wasn't prepped for this. She cried about her experience on the street, and all of a sudden, we had all of Israel enraged. Now, the one thing I made sure of, exactly what you said, you really know your facts. Yair Lapid said Kitzonim in the Mishnah. He said Kitzonim in Beit Shemesh. All the Haredi community had to do that night, it was Motzei Shabbat, after Shabbat, was to stand up and say, we agree 100% with the condemnation that you just heard on Channel 2. These people are Kitzonim, they don't represent Torah, and the whole story would have blown over. But instead, and all there was that Channel 2 piece, that all there was. There was no outrage anywhere. They stood up and they said, you're all against us, you all hate Torah, and that was a mistake. That was a mistake, and I blame the Haredi community for that response. It's not always us against them. It's not always us against them. Let's try to figure out who the them is, and if extremists who are violent, and it's not the rest of the Haredi community, and that's what they should have said, and then it would have gone right. So that's my take on the story.
Okay,
How much time do we have? Time for
Let's have one more question.
Okay, one more question, and I'll stick around afterwards, and I'll try to answer questions. Yes.
So everyone here has been talking about how the Yeshiv's relationship is with Haredi parties, with Haredim in Israel. But Israel is a democracy. There's more than one people in Israel. There's also the Arab parties, Haddad. How is Yeshiv's relationship with them? How would Yeshiv want to work with those parties to better the future of Israel, better the future of the Arab population of Israel? Because we know that they're also hurting. They're also they also have low socioeconomic issues. And I mean, just like the Haredim, we both need to work with these two communities to make one better Israel.
I feel very bad for the Arab Israeli population because they don't really have anybody representing their interests in the Knesset either. The small parties that you mentioned all try to outdo each other in terms of they could be more nationalistic and Palestinian in nature instead of really being there to serve. I see this on a regular basis. They get up at the Knesset and they start railing against issues that deal with Palestinians, and I'm thinking to myself, your people don't have, you're right, they don't have the infrastructure they need, and it's a shame. There's one Arab member of the Knesset, the Meretz Party, who stood up in his inaugural speech, and he said to all of us in the Knesset, he said, if you notice, I didn't walk out to Hatifa at the inauguration, he said, like the other Arab case did. And he said, because I accept the fact that I live in a Jewish state. And now my responsibility is to represent the minority of Israel, which is the Arab Israeli population, and try to serve them best. I reached out to him, and we're going to actually sponsor a bill together about protecting all religious sites in Israel, whether Jewish, Christian, or Arab, and worshipers. It's a complicated bill, but we're going to work together. Because we absolutely are willing to work together with Arabs, and they deserve their rights in Israel as well. The shame is, I said before, that the parties have become so nationalistic in nature. We're going to be passing a law for electoral reform. It's going to raise the threshold to get to the Knesset from 2% to 4%. That's going to basically wipe out the small parties. Not wipe them out, meaning they shouldn't be there. They're going to have to join together and work together. When that happens, that battle to try to be more Palestinian is going to really go away because they're now in the party together, and we really hope that they'll start representing the Arabs' best interests. Once that happens, by the way, we're going to pass a law that requires national service for Arabs within Arab communities as well. Because just like we're saying that all Jews have to serve in Israel, so the Arab population has to serve as well. Not the military, but national service within their community. But we have to invest a little bit more in their communities first before we can do that. So that's the approach. I just want to encourage all of you. Yeshiva is known in Israel for its Facebook operation. Yair ran almost his entire campaign, and since then, even as Minister of Finance on Facebook, we have strict orders that we're supposed to go on Facebook every night and speak to the people. It's actually a remarkable experiment in democracy because people can give you their criticism right there. And this past Thursday, I posted something which I thought was innocent, and before I knew it, it caused it was headlined as my first mistake as a member of Knesset, so we put it that way. But it's great to have that interaction back and forth. If you want to be in touch, feel free to go onto the Facebook page. It's just my name. And if you have any questions, you have ideas, you have criticism, feel free to be in touch. And I look forward to hopefully continuing the relationship.